Welcome back. Table saws are great, but they're pretty limited on what they can do until you start making jigs for them. Today, I've got 5 DIY table saw jigs that you should have in your shop, so let's get right into it. First on our list, we have the Cut Sled. The Cut Sled is by far the most common and arguably the most used table saw jig. This one I created here was made from a scrap piece of plywood and a few pieces of 2x material. As the name suggests, the Cut Sled in its most basic function is used to cross-cut materials at 90 degrees. With some modifications and add-ons though, it can do multiple angles and even serve as a picture frame jig. This jig is available through many sellers, and there's even a new version from King's Fine Woodworking that incorporates all of these functions and a lot more, but you can also build something like this here for less than $30 that will get the job done. Hey, I just want to take a second to apologize. There's a cricket in here that won't shut the heck up. I can't get to him wherever he is. I don't have any spray to spray back there or anything. So you're going to hear a cricket chirping throughout some of the videos in this. So sorry about that. Second, we have a jointing jig. This may look basic, but it is very useful. This is simply just a piece of plywood with some T-tracks screwed onto the face of it because I was too lazy to actually route it in. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever needed to joint the edge of a board that was too wide for your jointer? Maybe you can't afford a jointer. If so, this cheap jig can do the job of a jointer, kind of, at a fraction of the cost. Where this jig shines is cutting a straight edge on the edge of your lumber simply by just hanging the material off the edge of the jig far enough that the blade will cut material along the whole length of the board. However, when it comes to the face of a board, it's about as useless as a fishnet condom.
Fishnets out of here.
Out!
To joint the face of a board, you'll need a jig for your planer. Before we move on, if you're getting any value out of this, or if I made you kind of ponder what a fishnet condom was and how that would work, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like the video. It's the best way to help me grow and provide better content in the future. Moving on, we have this taper jig. You'll notice this isn't too dissimilar from the jointing jig. That's because they're used in the exact same manner. But the goal of this jig is to create repeatable tapers on table legs. It's made again from scrap material because I'm cheap. It has some fixed fences as well to create a taper on standard height table legs. The taper does not run the full length of the leg to allow the mount point of the leg to remain square, as well as give some additional appeal to the finished leg. Taper jigs can be tailor-made for a specific purpose like this one, or can be more like the jointing jig that can be used to make custom tapers based on each project's needs. Basic taper jigs can be bought on Amazon for around $50.
Crickets, crickets, crickets.
Next up, we have a shim cutting jig. Now, before you ask, yes, you can buy shims at the store. You can also buy lube at the store, but why would you do that when you have Crisco at home? If it wasn't obvious already, the shim cutting jig cuts shims. If your workshop is anything like my garage, you cannot trust the levelness of the concrete. So when building cabinets and other shop furniture, it's handy to have a jig that can cut extra shims when you run out. This jig can be made for around $5 in scrap material. Last but certainly not least is a fence for your router. It's very common in small shops to see router inserts built into a table saw, as it takes up virtually no additional space, and sometimes the only way to get a router table experience without the extra footprint needed for a dedicated router area. Continuing with the theme, this was built with plywood scraps. The fence itself is just 2 strips of plywood that are screwed together and have an elongated circle cut out of the fence. The only purchased part of this is the hose attachment, which can be found on Amazon for as low as $7. All in, this jig comes in around $15, and the best part is it just clamps to your fence and you're ready to go. Now, I know there are many more jigs that I didn't discuss here, but these 5 are some of my essentials that I see the most use in my shop. Let me know down in the comments what your most used table saw jig is, and if you have one that didn't make the list, that is way better than the crap I showed here today. So thanks to everybody that made it to the end. I hope you all have a great weekend, or not. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Until then, I'll catch you on the next one. Later. Before we move on, if you're getting any value out of this, or this cheap jig can do the job of a jointer, kind of, at the fraction of the cost. At a fraction of the cost. The goal of this jig is to create repeatable table leg tapers. Taper jigs can be tailor-made for a specific purpose. Fudge. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever needed to joint the edge of... What the heck? Freaking flies.